I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. So thank you so much for joining me today, Tyler. I'm so excited to have you and have this conversation with you.
Well, Tanya, I've been looking forward to this. This has been circled on my calendar for a little bit, especially because you and I run in such similar circles and you and I are connected without actually being connected. So to be able to have this conversation with you today is a highlight of my week.
I am so excited because usually people, we were having this conversation off air where people are like, oh, you're from Canada. Do you know Bob? And you're like, oh yeah, we go way back. But we actually knew all of the people we were talking about. So that's a rarity, I find.
Yeah. Well, it helps that you and I are all of 3 hours down one highway away from each other.
Right?
So
Because
we'll make the QE2 reference for those in the know, and everybody else can be confused by what I just said.
I know. That's okay. Our American listeners will be like, what? So you're actually in Calgary, Alberta, and I'm in Camrose, Alberta, the one without the mountains. For those that try to Google it, because I get that a lot. So I always get really excited when I have another Canadian on the show. So tell us a little bit about your story, because you sort of started as an actor, but really, really young. So tell us sort of take us back to 6-year-old Tyler.
Oh, yeah. As Vicini said, we start at the beginning. So yeah, no, I started in theater when I was 6 years old. I don't know if it was because of my father passing away. He was in a single vehicle car accident when I was 6, and I didn't really grieve my father's passing for about 6 years. And so I don't know if it was because I needed an outlet or if it just kind of became the outlet or what it was, but both my mother and my uncle really encouraged me to get into the performing arts, and I took a definite shine to it at a very young age. And so from 6 years old, I was on theater, and then I got into film and television a little bit later on, and made a really good career of it, actually, up until about 25. And then I got a little jaded with the industry and retired. Went back to school, got an engineering degree, started my own business, grew the baby, and then watched that poor entity die a very painful death. Actually, it was really sad for me to see that business go under. And but Phoenix Rising, I created another business entity, which has been going really well and has a couple of spin-offs. Like it's neat to have grown an empire where I have employees, not all of them full-time currently, but I definitely have contractors and subcontractors and part-time staff and various enterprises going fairly regularly. But all of that wouldn't have come without some struggle and some strife. So I'm happy to be on here and be able to chit chat more about it.
Yeah. And I would love to, talk about, and I know it's sort of dredging stuff up, but I think it's important for, for people to hear, like, when you started that first business, of course, you probably went through what everybody else does, right? The elation thing of like, yeah, this is it. Like, this is the golden ticket kind of thing. And then you create this. Walk us through a little bit of what that was like when you sort of realized this is just not working.
Well, so I come from a very entrepreneurial family. My father was a teacher, but took a sabbatical to open up a restaurant in downtown Calgary, actually on Electric Avenue. And Electric Avenue was still called Electric Avenue and wasn't just 11th. And it was actually in working in that business that he, when he had passed away, he was working really long, crazy hours. And I grew up south of the city at the time. Right now, for me to get to from my house to my mom's house, and I again, I'm in Calgary and she's still at our ancestral home. It's like a 25-minute drive. But when my dad was doing it, downtown Calgary home was like an hour and 10 minutes, and he was working 18-hour days. So he was always entrepreneurial, and I don't know if I got it from him or my uncle. My uncle started a photogrammetry business, which is a fancy name for map making. And he had moved his family from the East Coast, which is where my family is originally from. I was born and raised in Alberta, but my dad was from Nova Scotia. And so my uncle moved his family from Nova Scotia to Ottawa, got a job in Ottawa as a photogrammetrist. And then his firm in Ottawa transferred him out to Vancouver. And then the firm went bankrupt about 6 months or a year into him being transferred out with his young family. I think my cousins were 2 and 4 at the time, maybe. And he gathered 2 of the other gentlemen that had been working with him, and he said, I'm willing to put my house up on a second mortgage and get all of the money together if you guys are willing to join me, and we'll buy all this equipment and we'll start our own firm. And I've known that story for a while, and he grew what was called triathlon mapping into one of the most recognized mapping firms in North America. He had some of the biggest contracts in North America, competed with lots of firms, ended up being bought out by a massive multinational conglomerate for a ridiculous sum of money. And just, he did well for himself. And I think I was always inspired by that. So when I started my company, it was a mapping firm. And I had a great tutor when I went back to school and mentor. And she kind of knew my heritage and my lineage and talked me into taking this crazy leap of faith with her and starting this mapping firm. And we went one step further. She had been a photogrammetrist for 20 years. I liked doing it, but it wasn't really my big passion. I liked the technology side of things. And so we decided to rebrand her company and start a new company called InView Solutions and specialize in interior mobile mapping. And at the time, we had proprietary equipment that we had helped develop with a very well-known equipment manufacturer here in Canada. And we had this interior mobile cart, which had lasers that scanned the walls and told you the distances and created pretty 3D pictures. And then it had a camera on top, and so we could project the pictures on, and we could make full 3D renderings of buildings down to millimeter precision, which is unheard of even right now. We had this fancy IMU, which is an inertial measurement unit. It's this little thing that knows the orientation of a cart. They actually use, the one that we had was the same version that they used to guide Scud missiles. So we had to get top secret military government clearance and then have a whole bunch of security around this cart just because we had this IMU unit in it, this gimbal that could tell orientation and GPS. And so we were able to walk this cart through buildings. The problem was we could see all of the applications for it, but nobody else could. And the technology at the time was new, which means it was expensive. So we had this really expensive technology that nobody knew or understood. And our entire business model was hinged around it. And so the demand was low. The price tag, the price of adoption wasn't high, or the cost was significantly high, but the amount of people willing to adopt the technology was low. And now every time I see a Google ad, because it's targeted for me because I've got geomatics as a background. Every time I see a Google ad for start your own business with these mobile scanners that cost $10,000-$15,000, and every realtor is using this technology now, even though 10 years ago I couldn't get builders or realtors to grab onto it. it just makes me smile. I'm like, well, I was 10 years ahead of the curve. Look at me being a genius. But unfortunately, my genius did not translate into financial success nor a successful company. And it collapsed. It didn't go anywhere. And we had, between that and my business partner actually passed away quite suddenly, and we didn't have the right director's insurance in place. So there was literally a nail in the coffin to the business with that. And I had all of this. When you're doing the work that we were doing, your primary client is the government. And anytime you work with the government, they want you to have a safety system in place. So one of the side benefits that I got from starting the business was all of the safety training that I got. And I've taken that safety training and actually pivoted into the new business that I started. And then that has developed into a whole bunch of other sub sectors of businesses. So I have the parent company that houses 3 or 4 other smaller entities that do distinctly different things. And none of that would have come if it weren't for the collapse of the one business. And I certainly wouldn't have learned all the lessons that I needed to get this one going and maintain it for the last 6 years.
Which is hard, right? Like, and I've had businesses before that, have failed, and I have some that, have been really successful. And I think, hindsight's always really great to look back and go, that was a really valuable experience. But at the time you're like, this sucks.
Yeah. Well, and the biggest lesson that I took away from that was, don't tell the client what they want. Let the client tell you what they want. And if you need to innovate on their behalf, jump. Like, there's nothing wrong with innovation. There's nothing wrong with coming up with out of the box solutions, but do it based on client demand, not because you know that you can do a really cool thing. Right? Or prove the model a little bit more. I know with my coaching now, like when we put together our packages, I will sign people up with a general idea. So it usually starts with hey, what do you need? What would interest you? And I get a whole bunch of feedback, usually through Facebook groups and stuff like that. And then I go, okay, well, if I put together a package with all of these things that you're asking for and charge this much, who would be on board? And then when they go, oh yeah, I'll sign up, I sign them up and then develop the package based on it. And I wouldn't have known to do that if it weren't for the lessons I learned through InView.
And I think that those lessons obviously are important. And, I like, sharing those stories, because I didn't for the longest time, because of course it's admitting failure. It dredges up all of the emotions from it. It's not something I choose to remember on an average day. Like, I don't, wake up in the morning and be like, remember that day I colossally screwed up that business? Like, right. But I think that it's important, because not only does it help us to remember those lessons, but I think it helps other people to hopefully not make those mistakes. And, one of the things that I think is so interesting about what you talk about is the importance of storytelling. And, but there's a lot of people that are out there that think, well, that's great. Like, I mean, he has all of these great stories, and, he was an actor, and like all of this stuff happened to him. I don't have anything. Like, I led a boring life. Like, what am I going to talk about? So let's talk a little bit about, what would you say to those people that are like, I don't have anything interesting. Like, I don't have all of these monumental life things that happened to me.
Well, so first of all, everyone has a story. And all things don't necessarily have to be monumental to be valuable learning experiences that you can share so that other people can learn. And when people list my life, like if I go back and do a biography, I go, wow, that's pretty impressive. But I want your audience to know I'm the same way. Like I was on a podcast literally 2 weeks ago being interviewed, and I was like, and because I like to edify my clients. I think I love talking about my clients' stories. I love talking about their successes, because I will always feel that I don't really, what I do doesn't necessarily make impact. Where my impact happens is by helping other people have impact. And the host called me out on it. He went, well, first of all, your story has impact because you are able, if you didn't have the impact, you wouldn't be able to help these people. And I went, okay. And he's like, and just look at your story, you know, on stage at 6 years old, medical incident that paralyzed your body at 17. You overcame that to go out to Vancouver on your own, 17 years old, had a film career that is Googleable and IMDb, and most people want to know about it. You know, what did you do in Freddy versus Jason is just about the first question every show host, including yourself, asked off air.
I did,
You know,
but
like,
in my defense, it was because my son was like, how did he die?
and now we have made a 14-year-old's day by knowing that not only did I not die, but I actually morphed into Freddy Krueger, and now he can watch it with his mom's permission. But, you know, like, people will focus on that. And then I was valedictorian of State Polytechnic in 2010. And I, started a business, and that collapsed, but I still started that business, and I didn't hulk back or shrink back into that. And I, grew from it and started another business. And I've dabbled in all kinds of things. I'm a musician, and I love to drum, and I, in my spare time, I goaltend the ice hockey because, I'm a Canadian boy. That's what we do.
You have to.
And I like to be on the ice the longest amount of time. So goalie is the way that it is. So, I do have these things in my life, and I would challenge your listeners to think about it, because I guarantee if they really examine their life, one of the exercises we do in my training seminars, I have people break down their life into 5 epochs or time periods. So you take your age, whatever your age is, and divide it by 5. And then we play the fun grade 3 math when you were first learning division. Remember, you divided it and then you had remainders. Remember the remainders?
Yes.
So we're going to divide your life into 5, and you're going to do even time periods. And then the remainder, you're going to tack on to the beginning of your life. So for me, I'm coming up 42. So I would take 40, divide by 5 is 8, take that 2 remainder, tack it on at the beginning. So my first epoch is from 0 to 10. And it doesn't matter what your listeners are, from 20 to 200, this will still work, right? You just divide it into 5. And each one of those time periods, I want you to look at them and go, what significant thing happened in this time period? What's the highlight? Because we all have a highlight. We all think of a thing. And it doesn't have to be tragic. It could be joyous, right? For me, from 0 to 10, the most significant thing that happened is the passing of my father. But from that, I can now examine some of the subtext from it. If it weren't for the passing of my father, I probably wouldn't have gotten into theater. I hadn't gotten into theater, I also wouldn't have the performance skills that I have that have now set me up for the career path that I have right now. So there are lessons in that. And Les Brown says it very famously, never tell a story without a point, never make a point without a story. So what we want to do is we want to find our stories around that, and what are the points to them? How do they serve us? For me, a lot of my through line of the stories that I have is finding the grace in a lot of these events. Because the passing of my father was not a good thing, right? Like, I'm not going to find the positive in having my father taken away from me at 6 years old. I don't need to find a positive, but I can find grace in it. I can find divine influence, and how everything, as Tony Robbins says, happens for me, not to me. And I think that by doing this story review, I can look at, 6 years old, father passes away. Next epoch is from 11 to 18. Well, the first time I openly grieved my father's passing was when I was 12 years old, receiving an award for the top student in elementary school. And I remember walking past in the gymnasium, the final days, end of June, and being very scholastically oriented. And again, probably because my father had passed and he was a teacher, and wanting to honor that, I think if my father had been alive, I would have probably rebelled against scholastics because dad was a teacher. But not having him there and needing to live up to a memory, I really pushed myself scholastically, and I surrounded myself with really good friends, which is another lesson that I learned from that. You are your social group. Your five closest people are a reflection of that. And so if you want to improve in life, you surround yourself with better people. And I've always used that through my life. And so I remember walking in the gymnasium past my mom, and there was an empty chair beside her. And to this day, I don't know why the chair was empty, because it was a pretty full gymnasium. End of year, like I said, award ceremony, all the parents were in, but that chair was empty beside my mom. And I remember walking past it, and in that instance, thinking, that's where my dad should be sitting. And there's no one there. And it was very symbolic for me. And all of a sudden, this wave of emotion came over me. And I was like, my father isn't there, because he's never going to be there. That chair is always going to be empty. He's never going to be sitting there in my graduation. He's never going to be sitting there when I graduate university. He won't be there for the birth of my daughter. He won't be there when I get married. And I had this realization walking up to the podium to receive this award, and tears are streaming down my face. It's the first time I had openly grieved my father's passing. Everybody just assumed I was happy because I'd run the award. And inside, I'm like, my father will never see my accomplishments. And it had a profound impact on me, because at that point, I was able to actually grieve and let go of emotion that had been pent up within me, because I was too young to really understand the finality of my father's death until that moment. And it was the thing that needed to happen. And so that was a very significant part in that time period, that 11 to 18 time period. But I also, at 17, had a medical incident that paralyzed the left side of my body. And when you are in the fine arts and your whole career, like I was going to a fine arts high school, I'd been acting at that point for what would be 11 years. And your whole life is ahead of you, and this is the thing. And then all of a sudden, your moneymaker, literally your moneymaker, gets taken away from you. I couldn't move the left side of my body, including my face. It just didn't work. It was devastating. And then I was able to work with a really great medical team, and two incredible doctors, Dr. Bob and Joanne Corbett, who took the time not only to address my physical health, but my mental health, and make me see that I had, the future was unwritten, that I had the ability to do whatever I wanted to. And yes, my face didn't work now, but I didn't know what it would be like in the future. So let's visualize and project what it'll be like to get it back, and work on the steps and action steps. And Bob introduced me to Dr. John DeMartini and the breakthrough experience, and all of these things came because I had that medical incident, and it made me fight and want it. At the time, I'd become very cocky with my performance skills, because I could just do it, right? Like there was no challenge to it. And so when it was stripped away, then I got the hunger back, and I needed the hunger. And then the next epoch, I got to be the valedictorian of my school and start a business. The epoch after that, I got to be married. And most recently, I've had, we had our daughter later in life. I was 36 when Kenzie was born, just coming up to my 36th birthday. She'll be turning 6 4 days before I turn 42. And so to be able to be given the gift of having the wisdom of 40 years on this planet, but being able to see the world through the eyes of my daughter is just incredible for me. And to be able to adopt the curiosity of a 5-year-old again, and wonder and challenge the world the way that she does, to live it through her life. It's a blessing. And so again, I look for those time periods, what has happened, and your audience can do this too. You break it into 5 and just ask yourself, what is the most significant memory I have from this time period? Because it stays in your mind for a reason. And then ask yourself, well, why is it significant to me? What is the importance of this event? What did I learn from it? Or what did I need to learn to avoid it? And then you tell that story, you tell it to your audience, and that's when people are on board. Because I promise you, you have at least 5 things that happen to you. 5 things, guaranteed. And we just divide it into time periods. It makes it very easy to come up with it. And it takes a little bit of exploration, asking yourself really some hard questions. What did I need to learn from this lesson? Or where was the grace in this event? Why is it a memory for me? Why is it so significant? And then go from there.
Well, and I think too, remembering that it just needs to be significant to you, because I think a lot of times when people are thinking their story, they're thinking like, how can this moment in my life help to change everybody else? But I really feel like it's not about that. It's how did that moment change your life? And
Yeah.
that is the lesson.
And that's exactly true. So you need to know what the lesson that you learned is. And then in communicating that through the power of retelling the story from your point of view, you can get other people to learn from the lesson along with you. You don't, and it doesn't, these things, don't need to have to be tremendously significant, right? Like, you don't have to have invented penicillin to be able to talk about the benefits of a healthy lifestyle or how medication helped you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to have solved world peace, because so far no one has, and yet we have a lot of people who are making a significant impact in the world towards making it better. So it starts one story at a time. And what I find is most people are terrified to share a story. They're terrified to expose themselves. And usually, and why I wrote my book, is because everybody says that they're afraid to public speak. And I'm terrified of public speaking. And I call BS on that every time. Because if you claim that you are afraid of public speaking, then you are never able to go to a restaurant and order food.
Right.
Ever.
I love that
Because
analogy.
in order to order food in a restaurant, you need to declare a statement in public. That is public speaking. Even if it's, I want steak with mashed potatoes, you are speaking in public.
Right.
The difference is that public speech, you don't have a fear of judgment attached to that declaration. That's a fact. You know for a fact you want steak and potatoes, or maybe you want surf and turf, or maybe you're vegan and you would prefer to have this nice refried cauliflower, which I've tried and is tasty. But you aren't worried that the waiter or waitress is going to look at you and go, you have no idea what you're talking about, and walk
Right.
away. The funny thing is, as somebody who has worked in the hospitality industry, a lot of waiters actually do that. Like, you order a thing and we go, I wouldn't have gotten the chowder, but you enjoy that, right? But we're not afraid of somebody judging us for our food choice, usually. And yet somehow, if I tell you my story and I public speak, or if I'm asked to give a presentation, that fear of judgment all of a sudden becomes this real and visceral thing, and we worry about it, and we become obsessed with it. When in reality, if you're just sharing your story, nobody's an authority of your story better than you are. So just come out and say it. And it's when we can erase the fear of judgment that we can really have impact. And what I often do in the training seminars is I ask people, and I'll ask your audience to do this right now. If you're listening and you have the ability to do this, you have a pen and paper, the thing you're afraid to say is the thing that the world probably needs to hear. So right now, I want you to write down, just for you, and then you can toss it away and throw it away. Don't show anybody. This is you on your own private time. I want you to write down, what's the thing that's weighing on your heart right now? What's the thing that you're afraid to say? Maybe it's a conversation with your spouse or partner. Maybe it's a conversation with a child or a parent. Maybe it's a conversation with your boss or a colleague. There's something right now that's weighing on you that you're afraid to say. So write that down. Now, my next question for you is, what's the thing that you didn't even want to write down. And so you just wrote down something else when I asked you to do that. And that thing is probably what you need to say. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to go and expose all the gooey details. It doesn't mean that you have to get raw and authentic. No. Find what the lesson is in it. Perfect example. And again, you and I being in similar circles, Tanya, you would know, we have a mutual connection in Erin Sky Kelly. And she ran a beautiful event a few years ago, an evening with Mark Groves. And Mark Groves, as I'm sure you know, is an incredible coach and just all around amazing human being. And he was the keynote, obviously.
I remember that. I actually spoke at that event. So I remember that one very well.
You spoke. Yeah. And who was the best AV guy to help you out? Sitting at the table, Tanya. Now, I want you to think back to that evening. And there was a speaker who stood up and talked about the infidelity that had happened in her relationship. Do you remember it?
Yes, very, very well.
Right. Everybody who was there does. So for your audience, I'm going to walk you through the scenario. Everybody, including Tanya, had 10 to 12 minutes to present before Mark got up and spoke. So there was about an hour and a half prior to him taking the stage and doing his keynote presentation. And everybody was talking about various different things. And this one speaker got up and talked about finding a message on her husband's cell phone, just glancing down, because, you know, when it pings in, the message comes up. And he had just gotten home from what she thought was work. And a message flashed across her screen that said, "I miss you already." And in that moment, she knew what was happening. And she went on to discuss how, you know, as hurt as she was in that, and she was, and as angry as she was in that moment, she had to examine what had led to this. And that infidelity, in her talk, she talked about how it's a series of bad choices that just kind of escalate and stack on top of each other until the next thing you know, you're like, well, I'm just having lunch with her. Oh, we're just going to have a drink after work just to be social. And then, I'm flirting with her to be nice. And then, you know, the boundaries erode until the next thing you know, you're having an affair on your wife. What made this speech so powerful was, first of all, that's raw. And this incident had happened very recently in this relationship, and they had been married for quite a few years. And she said, but, you know, I want to work on our relationship. I have a choice. You know, I'm not condoning his behavior, but I was making choices too that led him to seek this comfort. I'm not justifying his behavior, but I need to take ownership in this too. And so all of a sudden you have a room divided because we were all on board. We were all on board when it was a woman scorned. But as soon as she said, I'm taking some ownership into my husband's infidelity, people were like, oh, no, honey, sister.
Yeah, like the room divided.
Divided right now. And then she said, you know, it doesn't mean that I have to accept his behavior or like his behavior, but I have a choice. I can either hold on to this or I can forgive him. And I choose forgiveness because I love my husband and I want to be in this relationship. But we have to work on it. And and then this is what made it the most amazing speech ever presented ever, in my opinion. She looked at the audience and she said, and if you're wondering what my husband thinks about me standing up on this stage right now, bearing our most intimate secret, all you need to do is ask him. And she pointed to him right in the audience, sitting 3 rows back. And I went, ooh,
run.
Oh, snap, right? But here's the thing. They wanted to empower people to know that infidelity is not the end of a relationship, that you can work on it. And from that, they grew such a successful practice on helping what would be otherwise deemed irreparable or broken relationships and get them back to a place of love and understanding and forgiveness, which, I mean, any relationship, never mind if that's somebody you're married to or romantically involved with or intimately involved with, just any relationship, to be able to repair that And that's the power of coming out and telling a story. She didn't have to get into all the nitty details. Like, I'll never know what the woman looked like or how many times they were together, if they were sleeping together or just kissing. We don't need to know any of that. The only details that we got was she got a text message and it was confirmed of what was going on, and she decided to forgive her husband. But the real detail was to be able to be at a place in their relationship where she could be talking about that in a room full of 250 strangers. And what happened at the end of it, Tanya? Did we boo her off stage, or did we give her the biggest standing ovation I've ever seen in my entire life?
Oh yeah. Yeah. She got the standing ovation for sure.
She had the love and support. So I would tell your audience, if somebody can come out and talk about the infidelity of their husband to a room of 250 people in front of him, the thing that you're afraid to say probably isn't that scary. And if it is that scary, think of the power that you could have if you are able to come out and tell your story effectively and make change with it. Her telling that story had a profound impact because now she's helping other couples stay together. And that is a beautiful thing, because let's face it, this world needs more love. We just need more love in it. And she's doing her small part, a little bit at a time, 1 or 2 couples a year. And that's all that matters. That's all that's needed.
And I think, like, even going along that, I think the impact of her story happened on twofold, because I think all of those people who were like, oh no, like, that's it. Like, that's the deal breaker, because a lot of people think that, right? You cheat on me, that's it. You're out the door. Like, there's no reason. I think it caused them to really sort of question, what would I actually do in that situation? Because it's easy for me to say, oh, that's it. I would never accept that. But when you're, 15, 16 years into a relationship, that might not be the answer that you would have when you were like 18 or.
And that's the power of this story, because she put us into her eyes, her mind. She told it from her point of view. She didn't gloss over it either. She's like, I've had infidelities in my life and blah, blah, blah. And I'm a relationship coach. And here's how this is what you need to do. Right? No. She took us on just a fantastic ride. And that's the thing too, the way that story was presented. You were there with her, and you could see every decision through her eyes, from the, what do I do now? What does this mean? What does this mean for our relationship? Is it repairable? Do I want to repair it? To, this is, and now, like, they are strong together. She's a best-selling author. Like, there's power in what she did.
Yeah. And I think that's what, that's what people need to understand, is that your story doesn't have to be justified to anybody else. And that was one thing that she realized, is that this doesn't have to be the right answer for you, because it's not about that. It's about you discovering something different in yourself, or even you questioning what your thought process were. And that to me was quite powerful, in her message and in her story, is causing me to, think a little bit harder and question, what would I do if I was in that situation? Like, is it as easy as what I, say in my head, where it's a yes or no sort of thing?
Well, and the funny thing is there's a business lesson in that too, in stating her point of view. And really, I mean, at that point, it became a branding, right? Like, this is who I am. This is my stance. This is my opinion on this. It was very polarizing. She ended up doing an incredible job of winning what I would think is probably 95% of the room onto her side and viewpoint in the way that she told her story. But one of the powers of being able to come out and state how you feel and really own your brand in doing it is that you're going to polarize a room. You are going to find the people that are attracted to your message. You are going to repel the people that aren't attracted to your message. And honestly, in business, that with that 80-20 rule, that's probably more than half of the key and the ticket, is not having to be involved with people who aren't aligned with your business strategy or your thought or your planning. And so by coming out and using the power of story and your personalization, you can really effectively communicate who you are, what you're about, what your stance is, and you will magnetically draw the people to you who want to hear that messaging, and you will repel the people who don't want to. And if anybody wants a really succinct, very fast example of just exactly what I'm talking about, I'm going to give you one slogan. It's a personal brand, and everyone listening to this will have an immediate reaction to it, guaranteed. And depending on who you are and where you are, your reaction will be different. But I guarantee you it's polarized. It's one or the other. You ready?
Okay.
Make America great again.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Regardless of how you feel,
Yeah.
politically, personally, morally, it doesn't matter. Regardless of how you feel, you had an instant association with that statement. I don't even need to use the person's name. I don't even need to use a gender. You know exactly who I'm talking about, exactly what they look like, exactly what they stand for. You know exactly what their group or their tribe looks like, down to the hat. And you know exactly who the people who are not even just a little against, but absolutely diametrically opposed to the messaging that is involved in that. You can see both camps right now. It's split down the middle. Now, is that a good thing from a political standpoint, from a country standpoint? That's another debate. But from a branding standpoint, to have people who back that statement 100% is an incredible thing. And to be able to alienate and isolate the people who do not brand that statement saves so much effort. Nobody who doesn't want, and what's worse is, because it's so polarizing and it's so good, the people who don't believe in it still care about the messaging because they want to know why that messaging is effective, and it's driving them insane. So it's double-edged sword. So not only are they're not, you don't have to focus your energy or attention on them, but they in turn are focusing their energy and attention on you, and then it's free press. So
yeah. Well, and I think that's what most people strive for, right? Regardless of whether you're doing public speaking or whether you just have a business, most businesses strive for that notoriety, right? Like I can see any other word written in Coca-Cola script and I know exactly who that belongs to, right? Like there's just, that's what you want in personal branding. You want somebody to be able to kind of say your name and know exactly what it is that you stand for. And I know even for myself, I spent a lot of my career shying away from that because I was always told I was too outspoken. I spoke my mind too much, and so I spent a lot of time trying to go, okay, how can I don't want to harm anybody's feelings, or I don't, so I spent a lot of time trying to be what others wanted me to be. And I realized that was a lot of work. And it was very exhausting.
Isn't it?
And I wasn't very good at it on top of that.
And that's the worst. And then because you're so generic and vanilla, nobody actually even wants to choose your flavor, right? You ask people what their favorite flavor of ice cream is, and they all, Rocky Road, right? Chocolate, double chocolate chunk, fudge, Oreo, right? There's very few. So I'm the exception to the rule. I actually do like a vanilla milk.
I do like vanilla too, but I do say like a French vanilla. So there you go.
Yeah, right. So there's a specific to it. It can't just be anything, right? I want proper vanilla. But making a determination and actually standing out, it's fine to have people who you offend. And I think the problem, and especially that word authenticity, oh man, does it get overused and thrown around a lot. Authenticity is synonymous with self-awareness. I'd have your audience write that down. Authenticity is synonymous with self-awareness. When people come out, and I know the couple of speakers out there, and they just swear like truckers, and they're like, oh, well, I'm just being my authentic self. And I'm like, but are you though? Or are you just, putting on a stage version of you? Because I know that when I take a stage and I'm doing a presentation, I do have a stage version of me, right? Mm-hmm. My friends, you, me, my social group, know me as Tyler, because that's who I am. I'm Tyler Foley. But when I take the stage, I'm Sean Tyler Foley, speaker, author, consultant. And I'm still authentically me, but it's a different version of me. It's the stage version of me. I'm a little bit bigger. I'm a little bit more grandiose. I'm leading with my heart and my passion. People who meet me in real life are like, wow, you're a lot calmer.
I get that a lot. You're
And
quieter than I thought you would be.
Yeah, I expected. And I'm like, well, it's actually because I'm an introvert and really terrified of you being in my space right now. And a lot of people don't realize that about me, but I don't mind talking about it either. And so I know who I am at my core. And when people see me on stage, they know that what they're getting is a real version of me, but it's still a version of me. And I think what's important when you're in business is that your business professional self still needs to be an accurate representation and reflection of who you are. So in order for you to present yourself in your business authentically, you need to know who you are. You need to know what your core values are. You need to know your why. You need to know what your driving motivational factors are so that you can be honest with people. And it will help you because when you can get to that point, you'll know the people you want to work with, you know the people who you don't want to work with. And the people who want to work with you will know that they want to work with you. And the people who don't want to work with you will know that they don't want to work with you. And your job is to find that happy little Venn diagram where the people you really want to work with and the people who really want to work with you come together and find that niche. I don't need to train 10,000 speakers. I don't need to have 1,000 people in my roster. What I need to find is 3 or 4 people a year whose messages I believe in, who I know I need to get out there, who also know that they need to get out there, and who identify with my style of training, because I'm not the only speaker trainer in the world. I mean, you Google speaker training, and I bet you get 10,000 hits. And I'm not even the only one in Alberta. I'm not even the only one in Calgary. I bet you I'm not even the only one in my community. But I'm the only one who does it my way. And that's what I would encourage pretty much any entrepreneur or business owner, whether you're a startup starting out, you're a micro business, 1 to 10, small business, or medium size, or you're a Fortune 500 company. No matter where you are on that spectrum, you need to really know who you are, who you serve, and why. Why are you serving them? Or they won't ever want to work with you. And then make that your focus, making sure that you're delivering for them and making them your focus and your priority. And you should be just fine in pretty much anything you do, business or otherwise.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. So talk to us a little bit more about your book. What made you kind of decide to start writing it, and what can people expect out of it if they haven't already read it?
Well, so The Power to Speak Naked came about because people just kept asking, how do you do it? It was honestly, it's the one question that I get the most. And it's actually become part of my training too, when I'm trying to help people discover their avatar, right? Who is your ideal client? I do 2 exercises. One of them is usually you 5 to 10 years ago. And you look at yourself, where were you 5 or 10 years ago? What lessons did you need to learn? And how did you get to here now? And so you just talk to yourself 5 years ago and say, listen, younger self, these are the obstacles that you're going to hit. These are the things that I've learned along the way. If you want to know the secrets, follow me along this way. And that's going to be a really great way to attract the people who you want to work with, who want to work with you. But that doesn't always work because, you may be in a totally different industry than you were 5 years ago, or maybe you don't like what you were doing 5 years ago, and even then you don't want to speak to you 5 years ago. Who knows what the thing is, right? So that isn't always the ideal model. It works probably 70% of the time. But what works 100% of the time is ask yourself, who comes to you the most and asks you what advice? What is the thing that just everybody asks you? And be specific on who are the people who are asking that question. And for me, the question that was asked the most was, how do you do it? And the context of that is, how do you get up on stage and be that charismatic, that engaging? How do you do that? And the people who are asking it the most, typically for me, were female entrepreneurs and charity owners between 35 and 55 who had a mission and were struggling telling their story. So that's my avatar. Those are the people that I work the absolute best with, and they're the ones that I identify with the most. And again, let's talk about story. Let's unpack it. Why would I identify with female entrepreneurs more than anything else? Well, I'm an entrepreneur myself, but I look at my mom, who had to raise 2 kids from 6 on her own. I look at how I see male role models in my life, from my mom's first boyfriend, who was a piano tuner and a musician, to my uncle, who ran his own mapping firm, to, you know, even the Corbetts, who were chiropractors, but, you know, that's self-employment in itself. I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit, but I've always seen where it's so much easier for the guys. Like, it just, I don't know why. I definitely don't think we're any smarter, and I definitely don't think we have any more resources. But I think we have, as a male species and gender, this unwillingness to see reason.
That's a good way to put it.
And so these obstacles that get thrown into our face, we tend to not put as much weight on them and dismiss them a little bit faster, I think. I don't know if that's an arrogance or a bravado or just stupidity, but I think the female entrepreneur is more concerned with that. Well, how am I being perceived? And I don't want to be perceived too pushy, but I need to be perceived as like you, the fine line that any female entrepreneur has to walk. And I watched it with my mom, navigating the struggles of her career, having to be assertive to get just fair treatment, but at the same time not come across this certain way, because then she wouldn't get considered and would be passable. Like that, it's not a thing that I will ever have to worry about. Because if I want a thing, I just say I want a thing. If you say no, I say okay, and then I go find another way to get that thing. And so that's the demographic that speaks the most to me, because I look at my mom and I go, look at what you did with so few resources and so many obstacles in front of you. And if I could go back in time and empower my mom or my sister or my daughter or my wife and get them, you know, if they have a vision, I want them to go for it. I wrote the book. It's dedicated to my daughter. And in the dedication, I say that may you always have the courage to speak up for what you believe in and the confidence that your voice will be heard. And I mean it to be true. I want her to grow up in a world where it doesn't matter her gender, and that it's obsolete and insignificant, that she's just a human being and she has this idea and she's going to share it and she's going to speak about it and she's going to empower other people through the sharing of that message. And I look at some of the clients that I've worked with. I mean, I've helped a charity that is dedicated to literacy in all forms, from infant to old age, and from ESL to just a lack of understanding or inability to read because of learning disabilities. Like she took this charity and took the whole spectrum of all the different reasons why people could struggle with literacy and tried to address them all, and the impact that has. I look at a charity that I've helped that works with women who have suffered either early pregnancy loss or early infant loss. I mean, I can't even imagine how much that impacts a woman when, you know, you are the only people on the planet who have the ability to give life. I can't create life. I can't grow another human being inside of me. And to have that, it's got to be an instantaneous connection that I will never comprehend or understand. And then to have that taken away, that's a grief that I will never understand. I've lost my father at 6 and I will never understand that grief. But to have somebody who can say, oh, I've suffered through this thing. This is why I've created this organization, to help women like me, so that you don't have to suffer in silence the way that I did, in a torturous manner that has such a negative impact on your mental health, that can cause your relationship to dissolve overnight. Something that you thought was on a solid foundation just crumbles. and to empower her to tell her story so that that doesn't happen to other people. Like that's where I get real satisfaction in my mission, because I'm just a pretty guy who was on stage for a while, right? And this goes back to the point that the podcaster made. Like, my story matters, but I see more value in showing people how to tell stories the way that I do, so that they can have impact in the world, so they can go out and do it, because that's how I have impact in the world. If I can't help people tell their story or their message, I don't have impact, because this is the one gift that I have. And I was given it for a reason, so I gotta make good with it. And if I can help people overcome the loss of a pregnancy or an infant, if I can help people read, if I can help Made by Mama raise more money from their charity efforts than they had in the last 2 years, just by being charismatic on stage, and then help them to tell their story better, so they don't even need to hire me to tell their story, that they can do it themselves, so that they can go out and help young families who are striving and keep with their mission and never have turned away a request for help. You know, that's what ignites me, that's what excites me, and that's the people that I want. If I can empower a businesswoman who has an idea and she wants to change the world, she wants to go out and do whatever, I want her to be able to spread her message, because I want to be able to help my mom, I want to be able to help my wife, I want to be able to help my daughter have a better future.
I love that. I think that's such an important message, and it's refreshing to hear from a male, I have to say, because I can relate to a lot of, a lot of the stories that you were saying, and that it might even be something for the, for the female listeners to think about their career, because it even sparked some stories that I'm like, man, it's been a long time since I've told any of those stories of what it was like, even for myself, starting so early in the career world, and dealing with corporate world as a young woman, trying to find my footing and stuff, and thinking there's a story that I haven't thought of in a long time.
Right. And that's where the fun of breaking down your life into those epochs are, and going back and reminiscing, because everyone has a story. Okay, and even just me telling you that triggered other stories, and you're like, oh yeah, no, there's this time that this happened, and oh yeah, and there was this time that this happened, and this happened, and it was really exciting, and this happened, and it was really not, and when we can open up and say it, like the Aditi Loveridge, who runs the infant early childhood pregnancy loss center, when she opened up and said, this is where I'm struggling, the women that came out of the woodwork, it wasn't one or two or three, we're hundreds, and I can't remember what the statistic is, but it's just heartbreaking, the number of women who will go through that in their life at least once. And you're like, that, and it's staggering to me. And so there's obviously the need for the support there, but it wasn't until she was able to come out and get raw, and say, look, this is how it affected my mental health. This is the state of that I was in at a while. And then more recently, she even came out and said, we thought we had done the work. And by we, it means her and her husband. But she was so focused on her healing that she forgot about her husband's healing and how it had impacted her. And they separated for a while, and then had to do what do we want? Do we want to work together on this journey, or do we want to walk away on this journey? And I'm very happy to say that they came together. But that's the thing, she had the bravery to come out and say that that was a struggle that she had. And now all of a sudden, there's all of these spouses of these women who have suffered this loss, who are crying themselves, because we're supposed to be men, we're supposed to be strong, we're supposed to protect our women, and I have no idea how to protect you. I don't know even what to say. I don't have the words. I don't know how to sympathize with you. I don't know what to do. And to be able to empower men now to say, I don't know, for one, and what resources are available. So now not only is she helping the women who are suffering with this, but the men who are suffering in silence. And that now she's just expanded her reach double to what she had before. That's impact. But it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't shared her story.
Yeah. And I think that's so important for people, to hear that. And I love the tips you gave on them to break that down and think of those stories, and ask other people. Like, I love, every time I go into a shop, if I know it's the owner, I will ask them, what made you start it? Because the stories are so interesting. And sometimes you're just like, I had no idea, like no idea that it came, from that passion or from that story. And there's, I think there's just so much power, not only in telling your story, but I think in also asking other people what theirs are. Cause sometimes people just need the permission to tell you.
Well, and the other thing is too, is that it reminds you of yours.
Yeah.
Right? When you start hearing other people discuss what their passion was or why the thing is, it may not be directly related to you, but you can relate to it. And it works both ways. And when you share your story, it triggers other people to think. Even in the course of this conversation that you and I have had, you're going, oh yeah, oh, and this, and then you say a thing and I go, oh yeah, no, and it builds on itself. And it's that positive momentum that comes from us taking the time to hear somebody else's point of view, to hear somebody else's motivation and story, and be inspired by it. And that's the power of story. That's the ultimate gift that we give to the world, is that it doesn't have to be globally inspiring. I don't have to tell the world's greatest, best written story that has impact throughout the world, that is felt throughout the eons, where they tell tales and poems of me and I'm written in song like a Greek god. It doesn't matter. If I can inspire one person today to just take a step towards their dream, one, that's still impact. And that's all I need to do. If I can influence more, great. But the goal is never to see how many people I can inspire in a day. My goal is, how can I inspire one person today?
Yeah.
And sometimes that person is me. Like, what can I do to jack myself up today to give myself permission to take the step that I've been holding back on doing? Because we all do it. Like, there's things, I'm supposed to be writing a report right now. I don't want to write the report. But if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. So how can I inspire me to actually do my other job instead of just constantly getting on the video chat and podcasting all day long, right?
Yeah.
Like, what can I do to get the nitty gritty done in the work? Because a lot of times that's the separation between success and failures. The people who are willing to do the things that other people aren't. We hear it all the time, and yet we still aren't willing to take those action steps.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing, because I think, especially with like social media and everything that's out there, people are like, so super focused on like the amount of people, the amount of followers, how many people they can impact, when really sitting down and realizing, like you said, impacting one human life is incredible. Like, that's a huge feat to be able to do that. And to that person, that was everything. And we forget that because we're playing a numbers game. So I think it's important, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's important for people to remember how much that one person then goes and impacts somebody else, and all of a sudden, before you know it, your impact's larger than what you thought it was from that one person.
I'd rather have a social media following of 10 people where all 10 were engaged than have a social media following of 10,000 people where 10 people were engaged.
Yeah.
One is 100% and one is 0.1%.
Yeah.
And that the fact that we chase this number as opposed to impact is, I'd rather have an engaged audience every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Yeah.
Because when we can influence somebody that way, and again, I've seen it happen where sometimes you're talking about lives, like actual lives, where you share a story that changes somebody's destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was just that one person, there's a ripple that you don't ever have to see how much that spread goes. But that's all you need to do, is impact the one person. And sometimes, again, that one person might actually be you.
Yeah.
So
I love that. So if people are sitting there and they're like, okay, I've got this thing, I've got this fire, I really, I want to do something with it. I hear everything that you're saying. I took all of the notes. I did my plan. I still need a little bit more help. Where is the best place for them to go to see if you guys can work together?
Well, so the best thing to do is to go to SeanTylerFoley.com. Sean is spelled the proper Irish way, SeanTylerFoley. And we've got a free resource there that they can download. It's the method. You can click on it. It gives you 5 insider secrets that I've developed over 35 years of public speaking. So it's free for them to use, and it gives you a little bit of an idea there. You can follow me on social media. Listen to any of the podcasts. I always post them up. But SeanTylerFoley.com is probably going to be the quickest and fast way to introduce yourself to me. And if you want to explore what it would be like to work with me, we have a one-on-one coaching available, and you can always have a discovery call with me. I don't work with everybody who applies to me. In fact, I reject more people than I work with, mostly because I need to know that I'm behind the message that I'm helping promote. I need to use my powers for good instead of evil. So I need to know what your message is, and I also need to know how dedicated people are, because my coaching is not cheap. And but I get results, and I get results because I don't compromise, and I push people to places that they probably don't want to go. And it usually starts with sharing the thing they don't want to share. And if they're not willing to do that, we're not going to be able to work together.
Right. I love that. Well, we'll make sure we have all of the links to where everybody can find you. Thank you so much for spending time today and for sharing all of your stories and others as well.
Tanya, it was a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
I truly believe that we all have stories within us that need to be shared. Some of them maybe just to a significant other or a child, some of them to hundreds and even thousands of people. And this all started when I was about in my 20s, and I started talking to my mom more about her life and what she went through. And the story she told me did so much. It helped us enrich our relationship. It helped me to grow a better understanding of why she is the woman she is today. It helped me to relate to her a little bit more as an adult. And it helped me to see where I got my strength from. And I'm sure that in your life, you have gone through something, whether it's huge and monumental, or whether it's just something small that you just never know who your story is going to impact. So get out there and share them. And if you're sitting there and you're thinking, I do have a story that I want to share, but I'm not quite too sure what to do now, then head over to our website at foxtalksbusiness.ca, click on blogs on the left-hand side of the page. You're going to see Tyler's face for this episode. Click on that, and then you will see all of the links to connect with his website, to also get his free resource, The Method, as well as all of his social media links. And I encourage you, if you're thinking that you have a story that needs to be shared, reach out to him and see if the two of you can work together. You won't regret it, and there's going to be so many people who are thankful that you took the step to share your story. So no matter what you're doing today, whether you're sharing your story with yourself in the mirror, with just one person, or with hundreds of people, make sure that you find time to have fun. Because if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?